In 1971, a John Steinbeck award-winning raconteur was working on his all-important debut album, and he decided that he needed to get out of LA and take a road trip to visit the Hopi Reservation. It's in northern Arizona, and just to clear his head and discover inspiration for maybe some new material. He got as far as Winslow, Arizona, when his old Willys Jeep broke down, stranding him for 2 days. It could have been a pretty frustrating ordeal, but instead, this legend turned an engine-troubled adventure into an American rock standard. And with a little help from a future Hall of Fame buddy who lived upstairs in the same apartment complex. The story of this endearing rock classic is coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever tossed and turned through the night after an amazing concert because you're just so amped up, you're going to dig this channel. Story straight from the legends. Make sure that you subscribe right now and click the bell so that you always know what's coming down the pipeline. We also have a Patreon that you're going to need to check out. Cool stuff you won't find anywhere else. And you can also get our new merch, including our latest vintage years collection. We've actually brought them down in price. That's below. It's time for another episode of our series, The New Standards. And this one is an American standard, if there ever was one. We're talking about songs that transcend genre, fads, everything. I'll give you a little hint here. While I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load, I got 7 women on my mind.
Trying to loosen my load, I got 7 women on my mind.
That oh so familiar opening line of Eagles' classic, Take It Easy. It sounds so carefree, so whimsical. And it's completely true. The 9-hour trek down Route 66 may have started as a decompression cruise for a then relatively unknown Jackson Browne, the musician that wrote that famous lyric. But it turned into a mechanical nightmare when his 1953 Willys Jeep broke down in the middle of Winslow, Arizona.
Well, I'm standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona.
1971 was a very exciting year for Jackson Browne, who just inked a deal with Asylum Records, his manager David Geffen's record label, to make his debut album, a watershed achievement for Jackson, who up to that point was primarily behind the scenes, away from the spotlight. Jackson had written a number of songs for other artists. There was Gregg Allman, Linda Ronstadt, and Joan Baez, but he had yet to establish himself as a solo artist. Rolling Stone magazine saw something in the emerging talent. It dubbed Jackson the new face to look for. It was time for Jackson to break out of anonymity and, vault into the limelight.
Doctor, my eyes.
I mean, the pressure to come up with compelling songs for his debut album overwhelmed Jackson Browne. He spent months working on music, laboring through sleepless nights, many of them. To clear his head, Jackson decided to get out of LA and visit the Hopi Reservation of northeastern Arizona. It's a place that he had fond memories of visiting as a child, I guess. Now, for the journey, Jackson's chariot was a beat-up 1953 Willys Jeep. It's normally a vehicle used by the U.S. Army. Now, it had no sound system, so Jackson used a cassette player that he'd bought at a pawn shop to listen to his tape of Willie and the Poor Boys by Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Down on the corner, out in the street.
He did this over and over and over again, along with a tape, I think it was from Santana. Yeah. After hours of driving in the night, Jackson got tired and he decided to pull off the road to sleep. It was somewhere near Tuba City, Arizona. Now, when the sun came up, Jackson was sleeping right in the line of fire, and he recounted that while he was sleeping, the desert sun burned one side of his whole body. It was like a hot dog. That's how Jackson described it. When he woke up and he discovered how severely sunburned he was, Jackson scrounged just enough money to check into a cheap motel, and what he did is he turned the air conditioning up in his room as high as it would go, and he just laid there for a day to soothe his painfully damaged skin from the sun just beating down on him. Now, the next day, Jackson motored as far as Winslow, Arizona, when his Jeep just started to sputter, and it broke down in the middle of this small town. So he walked down the street to the nearest garage, and he talked one of the mechanics to accompany him back to his stalled vehicle to assess the trouble with the vehicle. The diagnosis from the technician was that the culprit was indeed a failed alternator. Now, Jackson was not a mechanic. He was a starving musician. He was stranded in a small town. He had very little money. He didn't know a soul. He certainly didn't know anything about repairing a broken generator system. Now, Jackson was used to making ends meet with very little bread, so he took a disciplined, frugal, do-it-yourself approach, asking the mechanics at the nearby garage to walk him through how to fix his Jeep. The mechanics were happy to give Jackson an over-the-counter tutorial designating the parts that needed to be replaced and how to install them. I wouldn't know where to begin. Now, Jackson, he actually spent 2 days in Winslow trying to get his Jeep working, and he experienced a memorable slice of Americana in this process, including a flattering moment when a woman in a passing car slowed down to take an amorous look at the stranger from L.A.
Slowing down to take a look at me. Come on, baby.
With the Jeep good to go, Jackson got out of town. I guess he jumped on Route 40 for the backside of his adventure. He actually made it all the way to Zion National Park, which isn't very far from where I live. This is where he met a couple of ex-military guys just back from serving in Vietnam. They were hosting a kind of communal feast in one of the campgrounds in the park. The way that Jackson remembered is that one of the guys was a charismatic fellow with the last name of Buckmaster. I guess they all partied together that night, and Jackson Browne left the next morning to drive back to L.A. Now, not long after leaving Zion's Park, to Jackson's frustration, the Jeep broke down again. Only this time it was permanently dead. As luck would have it, Buckmaster and his friends saw Jackson Browne standing by his broken down Jeep on the side of the road. And, they offered to drive him back to his home in L.A. Lucky break for him there. Jackson jumped in the back of their gray Dodge van with his bag of clothes, and he had his guitar with him, and off they went, bound for Southern California. He just left the vehicle behind on the side of the road. In the back of Buckmaster's Samaritan van, Jackson Browne reflected on what had happened to him on this crazy road trip, and he began to formulate the lyrics for a new song about slowing down, loosening up, and living in the moment. Of course, he called the song Take It Easy.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
When he was dropped off at his home in Echo Park, Jackson had written most of Take It Easy, including the aforementioned opening verse, also the chorus, and the iconic line, "While I'm standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, and such a fine sight to see."
Such a fine sight to see. It's a girl, my lord.
Jackson also had completed the third verse that ended with, "I gotta know if your sweet love is gonna save me."
Know if your sweet love is gonna save me.
But, he was having trouble finishing the tune altogether. It was missing words. It was also missing an overall structure for Jackson to regard it as a complete song. So he just tucked it away, and he put the finishing touches on the other tracks to get his album ready to take to the studio to record. Now, before we find out how Jackson Browne finished this masterpiece and how Eagles came into the picture, I want to mention that this episode is brought to you by Bubs Naturals, providing collagen protein and MCT oil powder that will help us enjoy life to the fullest, especially as we get along in years. I love the Bubs Naturals mantra of die young as late as possible. It's a mantra that really resonated with me, and I've adopted it for daily inspiration and motivation. And I want to be one of those guys that says, I'm too old to do that. So every morning, I've started the day with a glass full of water and the Bubs Naturals Fountain of Youth Collagen. And several times a day, I eat one of the apple cider vinegar gummies that has done wonders for the stomach problems I've had for 20 plus years. With Bubs Naturals, there are no more excuses for you not to have an active, energetic lifestyle. Bubs Naturals upholds rigorous and uncompromising standards with satisfaction guaranteed, or they'll refund your money. Click on the link below to discover all the product options and sign up to have Bubs Naturals delivered to your door by Bubs Fast and Safe Shipping. So Jackson Browne lived at the same complex as another budding musician from Michigan by the name of Glenn Frey. Browne and Frey met through their mutual friend J.D. Souther. Souther, Browne, and Frey were part of the L.A. troubadour scene in the late 60s, early 70s, as many of you probably already know. It was Jackson who helped Glenn get his apartment. Jackson made him aware that his sister was soon vacating and encouraged him to check it out. Glenn was the lead singer of a band called Eagles. I used to make this mistake too. They're actually called Eagles, not the Eagles, but they mostly performed other people's hits back in those days. They were also the backing band for Linda Ronstadt. They too had just signed a label deal with Asylum Records with David Geffen, on the verge of putting out their debut album, and they were searching for new material to elevate themselves above cover band status once and for all. Jackson Browne and Glenn Frey, they hung out a lot. They shared ideas for new music, and one evening in a recording studio, Jackson played Glenn his stockpile Take It Easy. He confessed honestly that he had hit an impasse with the song. Jackson started by, singing the unfinished second verse that ended with such a fine sight to see. Glenn instantly added the next line. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford slowing down to take a look at me. Classic.
It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford slowing down to take...
Although Jackson had no idea what a flatbed Ford was, he loved Glenn's improv. So Glenn suggested that, they finish the song together.
Take a look at me. Come on, baby.
Jackson had intended to put the song on his own album, but he knew that it wouldn't be ready in time. He was already in the studio recording. So after much pleading and begging by Glenn, he gave his blessing for the Eagles to record the track. Besides a couple of lyric alterations, Glenn's biggest change to Take It Easy was stretching out that E in easy.
Take it easy.
Glenn tweaked and he polished the song, added his gifted sense of arrangement, and he completed Take It Easy in spectacular fashion. Take It Easy transitioned into an Eagles tune that proved to be emblematic for the group's hallmark harmony. It would be what Glenn would call America's first image of Eagles, with the vistas of the Southwest. And it was the inception of country rock to the masses.
Come on, baby. Don't say nay.
All four members of the Eagles' formative lineup contributed to that distinctive harmony on Take It Easy. A bassist, Randy Meisner, he sang harmony in the second verse with Glenn. The drummer, Don Henley, harmonized with Glenn on the chorus, along with the lines in the third verse. Though we will never be here again, so open up, I'm climbing in, so take it easy.
So open up, I'm climbing in, so take it easy.
The renowned Glyn Johns produced Take It Easy and the eponymous debut Eagles LP. However, he did so after declining a couple of times, actually. Johns was actually invited by David Geffen to see the group perform at a club in Boulder, Colorado. He was unimpressed, though. What he said is he found their performance confused and lacking cohesion. To Johns, it was obvious that there was a division in the band. Glenn Frey wanted the Eagles to be a rock and roll band. And Leadon, he wanted them to be country. And amazingly, that's what made this band so damn unique. Now, convinced that Johns would give Eagles, instant cachet, Geffen stayed vigilant to get him to change his mind. So he invited Johns to sit in on one of the band's rehearsals, back in L.A. Once again, Glyn Johns was underwhelmed, and he abruptly declined. It wasn't until Johns heard all four members harmonizing on Take the Devil, an acoustic song written by Randy Meisner, that he finally heard the brilliance of the Eagles, and he accepted the offer to produce their first record.
God, will you lead me where I roam?
Now, it was Johns who had the concept of incorporating a banjo into the musical arrangement for Take It Easy. Johns presented the idea to Leadon, Eagles lead guitarist and background vocalist, to play the double-time banjo for the song's breakdown. Now, at first, the band thought that adding a banjo would be an odd fit for this track, but it worked perfectly. As Johns recalled in an interview back in the day with Uncut Magazine, it was a difficult part to play, but Bernie delivered it in one take. Take It Easy was the first single ever to be released by Eagles. It climbed to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. This was in the summer of '72. It was the start of a string of hits that led to Eagles' soaring domination of the 70s. Jackson Browne, who had had that wild adventure through northern Arizona and southern Utah that inspired the genesis of Take It Easy, he ended up recording his version of the track for his second album, For Every Man, and this was in 1973. It was actually released as the second single from the record after Redneck Friend, but it failed to chart. Now, needless to say, Eagles' definitive version of Take It Easy, it's become an American rock standard. It put Winslow, Arizona, a town of just over 8,000 people, on the map, and really forever into the American pop culture, forever into our lexicon. Every year, thousands of tourists make a stop in Winslow and take pictures on the street corner where the legendary Highway 66 meets North Kensley Avenue, just to stand on the corner and take a picture in the spot where Jackson Browne allegedly stood and that Glenn Frey famously sang about. There's also a statue and a mural on that corner, the locals call Standing on Corner Park. It is of a statue of a man holding a guitar next to a red flatbed Ford, vehicle that was a product of poetic license from the late Glenn Frey. So poetic. The mural was actually damaged by fire in 2004, and the Eagles heroically donated a signed guitar that was raffled, with the proceeds of all that helping to fully repair that landmark. So my question has always been, where's the girl that Jackson Browne wrote about, that slowed down to take a look at him? There have been a couple of stories about this, but apparently that was also a fabrication that made the song, flow. According to Jackson Browne, the image of the girl was not from Winslow, Arizona, but of a girl from Flagstaff, about 60 miles to the east. You know what? Jackson Browne, he's arguably one of the greatest storytellers of the rock and roll era. He's entitled to embellish a little here and there. That's what storytellers do, right? I think, especially in music.
My Lord, in a flatbed Ford, slowing down to take a look at me.
Don Henley had an interesting take on the endearing charm of Take It Easy. To Don Henley, the song's appeal stems from how it evokes a sense of motion, both musically and lyrically. It's the romance of the open road that is part of the restlessness of the American spirit.
The sound of your own wheels drive you crazy.
Recognizing his gifted songwriting, Jackson Browne won the John Steinbeck Award in 2002 for his prolific, socially conscious lyricism and evocative narratives. Take It Easy deserves a special tribute to Jackson's amazing talent, a song he conceived that really just about any list of greatest songs of all time worth its salt should include. Take It Easy is all about the fun and the excitement of enjoying the moment, living in the moment, and not letting the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy.
Lighten up while you still can.
Lighten up while you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just find a place to make your stand and take it easy.
Understand. Just find a place to make your stand.
Jukebox poetry as well as rock and roll wisdom from Jackson Browne, Glenn Frey, and Eagles that will always make us feel so easy and light. Sing at the top of our lungs.
Take it easy.
This one takes me back to an argument or a really cool discussion I had with my dad back in the day about which song had the greatest opening line of all time that just hooks you from the get-go. I remember he was arguing for the Beatles. I read the news today, oh boy, from A Day in the Life.
I read the news today, oh boy.
And Eagles with Jackson Browne while I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load, I got 7 women on my mind.
Well, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load.
Me coming from the 80s, I was arguing for the Smiths. I am the son and the heir from a shyness that is criminally vulgar. Brilliant from How Soon Is Now.
All the shyness that is criminally vulgar.
I also argued for Prince. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life from Let's Go Crazy.
We are gathered here today to get through this thing called life.
Now, we argued back and forth for quite a while, had a great discussion. But in the end, I think he got the better of me. Here's why. He argued that he would say that the win would go to Jackson Browne and Eagles because it not only hooked your ear as a listener, it also introduced you to a band that would become an American institution. So it was not only the song it was introducing a legacy of a whole band. He said something to the effect, that line established the band and the genre of country rock and really an entire era of music. Remember, he said word for word, the second we heard that on the radio, that first line, the 60s were effectively over and the 70s had officially begun. Through the years, as I've thought about that line and my dad saying that the first time he heard it, I just think there's so much wisdom in that. That's where the 70s had officially begun. He would know, he was there, he heard it for the first time. Man, I miss those discussions with my dad about music. We had so much fun. We talked so much about every little lyric and every song. And, you know, just for old time's sake, I'm going to give him the win. I think he has it. Gosh, I learned so much from him. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Eagles and Jackson Browne. What are your memories of this? What are your thoughts on the opening line? Is it the greatest ever? On the origins of country rock and the Eagles as America's band of the 70s? Let us know in the comments. Let's have a great discussion below. If this content resonates with you, make sure to join our community by subscribing below. Help us keep the music alive. That's the whole idea. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.